The moment Dara Vance's pen left the unforgiving surface of the severance agreement, Chloe Sterling's smile stretched so wide it reached her impeccably manicured, arching eyebrows. Chloe, the vice president of strategic accounts, turned to the bustling, open-plan floor of the Chicago corporate office and clapped her hands with aggressive cheerfulness. "Attention, everyone drinks at Prime Steakhouse tonight, my treat entirely. We are finally restructuring this team for the future and streamlining our operations to match our massive new trajectory." Applause erupted immediately, though it was the hollow, reflexive clapping of corporate survival. Laughter echoed against the floor-to-ceiling glass walls, masking the underlying tension. Dara, a 35-year-old black woman who had spent 5 grueling years being the invisible, load-bearing backbone of the entire 9th floor, simply stood up. She carried her single cardboard box toward the elevator. She didn't look back, didn't shed a tear, and didn't offer a dramatic exit. She just pressed the button and vanished behind the sliding steel doors. 30 minutes later, the same elevator chimed with a heavy, ominous tone. Marcus Thorne, the company's ruthless chief executive officer, stepped onto the 9th floor. He didn't wear his usual charismatic, investor-ready smile. His face was the color of wet ash. In his right fist, he gripped a crumpled 50-page legal document, his knuckles practically bursting through his skin. The superficial applause had died down, replaced by the casual, oblivious hum of a Friday afternoon. Marcus's eyes scanned the rows of cubicles, completely ignoring the mid-level managers who were eagerly rushing forward to greet him. He bypassed Chloe entirely, his intense gaze landing firmly on the empty desk by the corner window. The desk with no pictures, no personalized novelty mugs, just a clean, terrifyingly vacant surface. "Where is she?" Marcus's voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the room like a physical blade. The temperature on the floor seemed to drop 10 degrees instantly. Chloe stepped forward, smoothing her tailored skirt, her corporate smile snapping back into place. "Marcus, what a surprise. If you're looking for Dara, she's no longer with the firm. We executed a strategic redundancy this morning to streamline the department. I handled the paperwork personally." To truly understand how the 9th floor arrived at this spectacular catastrophe, one had to critically examine the anatomy of the department. Dara Vance was originally hired as a senior account specialist, a generalized title that vastly underestimated her analytical capabilities and strategic brilliance. As a proudly childless woman who fiercely guarded her personal time and mental well-being, Dara required a flexibility that the rigid corporate ladder rarely offered. She needed the ability to leave the office at 4:30 p.m., log back on from her kitchen table at 9:00 p.m. on her own terms, and occasionally work remotely without being tethered to a cubicle. Because of these uncompromising boundaries, she had voluntarily stepped out of the aggressive management track. She actively traded the spotlight for autonomy and stability. Chloe recognized this vulnerability on her very first day as VP. Chloe was an executive who wore her ambition like expensive, overpowering perfume impossible to ignore and designed to dominate the room. She realized early on that Dara was a tactical genius, a fixer who operated flawlessly in the shadows. When complex negotiations with overseas distributors stalled, Dara dismantled the roadblocks. When federal compliance issues threatened to derail their quarterly earnings, Dara rewrote the entire regulatory frameworks at 2 a.m. But Dara never presented these massive victories to the executive board. She handed the pristine, thoroughly researched, finished briefs directly to Chloe. For 3 solid years, Chloe built her entire glowing reputation on the foundation of Dara's intellect. Chloe confidently stood in the glass-walled boardrooms, delivering heavily curated PowerPoint presentations built entirely by Dara. She used the royal "we" until it seamlessly, imperceptibly transitioned into "I." Chloe convinced herself that this parasitic dynamic was simply the nature of corporate hierarchy. Management extracts value, Labor provides it. If Dara lacked the ambition to claim the credit, Chloe felt perfectly justified in harvesting it. She viewed Dara not as a human being, but as an incredibly efficient piece of departmental software. However, as the stakes grew higher, this comfortable illusion became increasingly dangerous, and the architecture of Chloe's theft was destined to collapse under its own weight. By October, the Apex Dynamics deal had ballooned into a staggering $15 million commitment. It was the absolute white whale of the logistics industry, a contract that could guarantee bonuses for years. Suddenly, Chloe realized the terrifying magnitude of what was quietly sitting on Dara's desk. The highly coveted Director of Global Operations position was officially opening up in January, and it was an open secret that whoever successfully landed the monumental Apex contract was completely guaranteed the seat. Chloe aggressively stepped into the spotlight. Desperate to manufacture a narrative of her own leadership, she began intercepting vital emails, demanding to be blindly copied on every obscure thread, and scheduling high-level, weekly check-ins with Marcus Thorne to report on her remarkable progress with Apex. Whenever Marcus asked highly detailed, logistical questions about supply chain redundancies, Chloe would offer slick, incredibly vague reassurances, smoothly promising that her team had the technicalities perfectly under control. Dara watched this elaborate performance happen with a quiet, simmering clarity. She wasn't naive, and she certainly wasn't blind. She knew exactly how her grueling work was being hijacked. But she also knew something crucial that Chloe completely failed to grasp. Victor Hayes, the Chief Operations Officer of Apex, absolutely despised corporate empty suits. During a critical, high-stakes conference call that Chloe had actually bothered to attend, Chloe repeatedly tried to dominate the conversation with generic, corporate buzzwords and hollow synergy frameworks. Victor had literally muted the conference line, bypassing Chloe entirely to type a direct, private message to Dara's secure portal. Is your boss always this exhausting and only deal with the architect of the system? Dara, not the tour guide. Let me know when she's done talking so we can actually work. Dara never printed that message. She never showed it to HR. She just kept her head down, grinding through the massive appendices and complex legal frameworks. She firmly believed the final paperwork would ultimately prove who did the heavy lifting. But Chloe realized that if the board looked closely at the implementation plan, they would easily see Dara's fingerprints on every single page. The critical, irreversible turning point occurred exactly 48 hours before the catastrophe. The Apex contract was trapped in its final, agonizing legal review. The grueling time difference meant that Apex's aggressive legal team in Tokyo was relentlessly pushing revisions in the middle of the night. At 9:00 p.m. on a Wednesday, Chloe casually forwarded an 80-page PDF to Dara with a one-line, dismissive mandate. Fix the liability clauses by morning. I have a breakfast meeting with Marcus to confirm the win. Dara didn't sleep a single minute. She sat hunched at her small kitchen table, a cold cup of coffee sitting beside her, painstakingly cross-referencing international trade laws, while her apartment remained peacefully quiet. At exactly 2:00 a.m., her eyes caught a catastrophic, potentially fatal flaw in the indemnity language drafted by their own firm's lazy legal department. If signed as is, it would leave Apex entirely exposed to a massive, multi-million-dollar federal tariff penalty. Dara bypassed protocol. She got on a direct, secure video call with Victor Hayes at 3:30 a.m. She didn't act like a subservient, desperate vendor. She acted like an equal partner. She told Victor point blank that her own company's legal team had made a glaring mistake that could cost him millions. She systematically proposed alternative wording that protected Apex fully, sacrificing her own firm's minor leverage to save the overall deal. Victor stared at her through the glowing screen for a long, heavy, silent minute. You are actively arguing against your own corporate lawyers at 4 a.m. to protect my bottom line, he asked, his voice rough with sleep and disbelief. I'm protecting the longevity of the partnership, Dara replied smoothly, without hesitation. A contract built on a hidden trapdoor isn't a partnership. It's a liability. Victor nodded slowly, a deep respect forming in his eyes. Send the revision. I'll have the board sign it at sunrise. But before he logged off, Victor added one specific, non-negotiable condition to the final annex, a clause. He explicitly insisted his lawyers bury deep within the operational requirements. Thursday morning, Dara arrived at the office at 9:15 a.m., completely physically exhausted but professionally victorious. She had sent the final, executed PDF to Chloe's inbox hours ago. However, as she confidently walked toward her desk, she immediately noticed her computer monitor was disconnected and her drawers were already boxed up. Her security access badge unexpectedly beeped red, denying her entry at the main floor printer. Chloe stood casually by the corner window, flanked by a remarkably nervous-looking human resources representative named Greg. Dara, let's step into the conference room for a moment, Chloe said, her voice dripping with weaponized artificial sympathy. Inside the soundproof glass walls. Chloe slid a manila folder across the mahogany table. As you know, we are aggressively transitioning the department into a new structural phase now that the Apex deal is firmly in administrative territory. Unfortunately, looking at the new organizational chart, your role as senior specialist is being made redundant. Dara stared coldly at the severance agreement. It offered a pathetic 2 months' pay, absolute pennies, compared to the massive 6-figure performance bonus she was contractually owed for closing Apex. Redundant, Dara asked, her voice dropping to a dangerously calm register. I originated, built, and successfully closed a $15 million account. The ink from Tokyo isn't even completely dry. The team closed it, Chloe corrected swiftly, her eyes narrowing. And frankly, Dara, your attendance metrics and highly unconventional hours have been a recurring compliance issue. We're offering a generous severance package to part ways cleanly. If you choose to fight this, Greg here is fully prepared to launch a formal, hostile audit of your time cards. It will enter your permanent record. It could get incredibly ugly for your future employment. It was a blatant, heavily calculated trap. Chloe was maliciously using at-will employment loopholes to execute a flawless corporate assassination before the bonus structure locked in. Dara placed her hands flat on the table. Chloe, before I sign this, I strongly suggest you read Annex 4, Section 9 of the Apex Final Agreement. Read it very carefully. Chloe simply smirked, arrogantly tapping her expensive pen against the severance document. I'm very intimately familiar with the contract I negotiated. Dara, the tedious administrative details are handled. Sign the paper, take the money, and leave. Dara held her gaze for 5 agonizing, silent seconds, recognizing that warning an arrogant person is a complete waste of breath. She picked up the pen, signed her name with deliberate precision, and stood up. Stepping out of the conference room, Dara immediately felt the collective burning stare of 30 colleagues pressing into her back. The corporate grapevine was notoriously lightning fast. Everyone on the floor knew exactly what had just transpired behind those glass walls. They knew implicitly that Dara was the sole architectural brain behind the massive Apex deal, and they knew Chloe was ruthlessly stealing the kill to secure the directorship. Yet, as Dara walked slowly to her desk to pick up her single box of personal items, no one spoke a single word of defense. The junior analysts, who frequently relied on Dara for help, suddenly found their spreadsheets endlessly fascinating. The mid-level managers stared intensely at their muted phones. The silence was deafening, a cowardly, calculated symphony of self-preservation. They were actively watching a corporate execution and choosing to look away to protect their own paychecks and avoid Chloe's wrath. Dara didn't harbor fiery anger toward them. She felt a profound, icy clarity. She realized that corporate loyalty was a complete myth, a lie printed on motivational break room posters. She picked up her box and walked toward the main elevator bank. As Dara passed the corner office, Chloe leaned against the doorframe, visibly projecting an aura of triumphant, magnanimous leadership. "Take care of yourself. Dara, good luck in your future endeavors," Chloe projected loudly, ensuring the entire floor heard her faint grace. "You really should have read Annex 4. Chloe," Dara said softly, the words for Chloe's ears alone. The elevator doors closed. Dara walked out into the crisp Chicago air, drove to a nearby cafe, ordered a latte, and calmly waited for the inevitable explosion. At exactly 1:30 p.m., CEO Marcus Thorne sat perfectly still in his sprawling penthouse office, poring over the finalized, freshly bound Apex Dynamics contract. He was a deeply paranoid man who inherently trusted nobody, making it a strict personal policy to read every single word of major agreements. He methodically skimmed through the complex pricing tiers, the rigid delivery schedules, and the updated liability adjustments. Everything was flawless, highly lucrative, and surprisingly favorable to their firm. Then he slowly turned the page and reached Annex 4, Section 9, Operational Continuity. Marcus adjusted his reading glasses. He read the dense paragraph once. Then he read it again, the color rapidly draining from his face until he looked physically ill. The ongoing validity, financial commitment, and execution of this agreement are strictly contingent upon the continuous and direct project leadership of Ms. Dara Vance. Apex Dynamics formally recognizes Ms. Vance as the sole architect of the integration model. Should Ms. Vance be removed, reassigned, or terminated from her current role for any reason, Apex Dynamics explicitly reserves the right of immediate, unilateral termination of this entire agreement without financial penalty, and all proprietary intellectual property detailed herein shall be immediately withdrawn. It wasn't just a standard continuity clause. It was a legally binding hostage situation. Victor Hayes had legally chained $15 million exclusively to a 35-year-old black woman whose name Marcus had never once heard mentioned in a single executive board meeting. Marcus frantically grabbed his desk phone and aggressively hit the speed dial for the legal department. "Get me the Apex file. Now." "Sir, we just received a high-priority email from Victor Hayes." The general counsel's voice trembled slightly through the speaker. "It's a formal notice of termination inquiry. He's aggressively asking why Dara Vance's company email just bounced back as deactivated." Marcus felt the floor completely drop beneath him. $15 million, the biggest win in a decade, was instantly vaporizing because of a bounced email. He slammed the phone down, grabbed the contract, and sprinted for the elevator. Marcus stood rigidly in the dead center of the 9th floor, the silence thick and absolutely suffocating. Chloe's highly practiced, confident facade began to visibly crack under his murderous, unblinking glare. "Marcus, I can easily explain." Chloe stammered defensively, taking a small step backward. Dara's performance metrics were highly erratic, and "Shut up," Marcus snapped, his voice echoing loudly. He violently threw the heavy contract onto the nearest desk. "Did you read Annex 4 before you fired her this morning?" Chloe hesitated, her eyes darting nervously around the room, realizing she was trapped. "The legal team is supposed to review the annexes. My role is high-level strategy and client relations." "Your role was to secure this massive deal," Marcus roared, completely abandoning any remaining pretense of corporate decorum. Victor Hayes explicitly tied $15 million to Dara Vance. Her name is in the legal binding exactly 12 times. Not yours, hers, and you authorized her termination 3 hours after the client signed it. The entire floor was utterly paralyzed. Even the senior managers held their breath, terrified of the blast radius. "She was deeply insubordinate," Chloe practically shouted, sheer panic finally setting in. "She went completely behind my back and altered the liability clauses at 3 a.m. She was a dangerous liability to the firm." Marcus pulled out his phone and read aloud. I have an email from Victor Hayes sent exactly 10 minutes ago. He states Dara Vance saved this company from a multi-million-dollar tariff trap at 4 a.m. while her superior was asleep. He says he will only do business with her. He is giving us exactly 24 hours to reinstate her as the lead director of this account. Or he walks entirely. Chloe's face went completely slack. Her grand, carefully constructed illusion had shattered completely in front of an audience of 30 people. "Pack your desk." "Chloe," Marcus said, his voice dropping to a terrifying, absolute calm. "You are suspended pending a full investigation. Give your badge to security now." At precisely 4:00 p.m., a sleek, heavily tinted black town car pulled into the narrow driveway of a modest, remarkably normal suburban duplex. Marcus Thorne, a man who usually summoned powerful politicians to his towering office, stood awkwardly on Dara Vance's front porch. He knocked twice. Dara opened the door, wearing a comfortable, oversized sweater, holding a steaming mug of tea in her hand. She didn't look the least bit surprised. "Hello, Marcus. You're exactly on time. May I please come in?" he asked, looking practically deflated, stripped of his usual corporate armor. They sat opposite each other at her small, slightly worn kitchen table. Marcus didn't try to spin the corporate PR machine or offer empty excuses. He laid the entire disaster out transparently. He told her about Chloe's immediate suspension, the aggressive legal threat from Apex, and the catastrophic failure of his own executive oversight in letting this happen. "I'm here to formally offer you the Director of Global Operations position," Marcus said, sliding a heavily drafted term sheet across the table. "Base salary is tripled, full retroactive commission on the Apex deal, complete autonomy over your working hours, and a public apology in front of the entire company." Dara looked at the paper, read it quickly, and then deliberately pushed it back. "I don't want an apology. Marcus, apologies don't fix deeply broken systems." Chloe didn't act entirely alone. The system actively allowed her to steal my work for 3 years because I didn't fit the demographic of what your executive board thinks a leader looks like. Marcus swallowed hard, recognizing the undeniable truth. "Name your terms, Dara. Absolutely anything." Dara leaned forward, her eyes sharp, analytical, and completely unyielding. "First, Chloe is terminated with cause theft of intellectual property. Absolutely no golden parachute. Second, the company institutes a mandatory originator tag on all major contracts, permanently visible to the board. Third, I want a 5% equity stake. If I am building the architecture of this company's future, I am owning a piece of it." Marcus looked intently at the brilliant woman sitting across from him. He realized with absolute, terrifying clarity that Victor Hayes was entirely right. Dara Vance was a titan, and the company desperately needed her far more than she needed them. "Done," Marcus said firmly, pulling out his premium fountain pen and signing the amended term sheet on the spot. All of it. The following Monday morning, the atmosphere on the 9th floor was uncharacteristically quiet. The empty desk by the corner window had been cleared entirely. But not by human resources. The building's security team had carefully moved the desk and all its minimal contents into the massive, glass-walled corner office that, until last Thursday, had belonged exclusively to Chloe Sterling. At precisely 9:00 a.m., the main elevator doors slid open. Dara Vance walked out. She wasn't carrying a sad cardboard box this time. She carried a sleek, expensive leather briefcase and radiated an aura of absolute, undisputed authority. Marcus Thorne stood waiting in the center of the floor, flanked by the senior legal team. He cleared his throat loudly. "Attention, everyone. I want to officially and proudly welcome our new Director of Global Operations, Dara Vance. Furthermore, effective immediately, a new strict attribution protocol is being implemented across all departments to ensure the actual working architects of our success are accurately recognized and appropriately rewarded." The silence on the floor was profoundly different this time. It wasn't the heavy silence of cowardice. It was the sharp silence of awe and newfound respect. Toi, c'est ton... The people who had nervously looked away when she was fired now couldn't look away from her spectacular rise. Dara didn't bother giving a triumphant, gloating speech. She simply nodded respectfully to Marcus, walked purposefully past the sea of silent cubicles, and confidently entered her new corner office. She set her briefcase down, opened her laptop, and smoothly dialed an international number. "Victor," Dara said warmly as the line connected. "The liability amendments are fully executed on our end. Let's talk about the Q3 integration schedule."